Hey everyone, welcome to War Stories number 3, Larry's Revenge. So, Larry. If you remember from my first war story, the last time we left Larry, he was sitting outside smoking a cigarette like a madman. So, what happened after that? Well, things pretty much went back to normal. That's how it worked, guys. And we continued playing MechWarrior for a while. I had moved on to Warhammer by this point. Just 40k, I hadn't quite gotten into fantasy at this point. This is probably maybe a year later, so I'm probably about 14 at this point. And I'm taking a break from Warhammer because I'd already played the guy I was playing like 3 times or something like that by this point of the night. Actually, it's probably more like twice. And so I didn't want to play with him again, but none of the other players were available. Several of them had just started games, so it was going to be at least an hour and a half until something came out. So I went over to my dad and I said, "Hey, can I have money for a drink?" And so I went and got myself a drink, and I sat back down near him, and he had just recently finished a game of MechWarrior. So it's probably about 3 hours after the War Game Club has started, and in rocks Larry and Greg. Because Greg basically drove Larry to the Wargaming Club. And so Larry's like, "Sorry I'm late, guys. Who wants to have a game? Let's do this. Come on, someone's got to be available." And the only person who was available at the time was my dad. And my dad's like, "Hey, Larry, I'll play a game with you." And Larry just goes, good one, Paul. I'll call my dad Paul. And my dad's like, "Well, I mean, I'm free, Larry, unless you want to play with Greg." And he's like, No, I don't want to play with Greg. We play with each other all the time, so. And he's like, Fine, Paul, I'll have a game with you. Sure, it'll be a nice short one anyway. Why was Larry being such a dick to my dad? Well, it wasn't completely unfounded. So my dad was the worst MechWarrior player in the club by a long shot. And the reason this was because he used artillery. Now, artillery in MechWarrior was kind of crap, because what would happen is you'd shoot your artillery, you'd put the tokens on the battlefield, and each token would have like a set of numbers on it. Because what would happen is next turn, it would hit. So the way it would hit is you'd roll the dice. You'd only roll 2, though. So one would be the direction that it headed in, and the other one would be the distance. Now, many artilleries had a thing where you rolled a 6, and you hit directly. So the distance dice didn't matter. But most artilleries would have a drift. Now, my dad played a faction called Highlanders, who had the best artillery in the game at this point, called Thumpers. Thumpers were really inaccurate, but they did a lot of damage. So generally what would happen is my dad would place the tokens down, the person would move out of the way, and then the tokens would harmlessly explode off in the distance. They very rarely hit anything. When they did, it hurt, but a lot of the time they didn't really cover their points cost, right? He'd have 3 of these tanks, which would make his infantry suffer and his mech selection suffer. So Larry, of course, is a point cheat as well at this point still. So he sets up his army, which is a heavy mech, 2 medium mechs, 2 decent tanks, and 3 power armor units. My dad sets up his army, 2 medium mechs, 3 thumpers, and a unit of light infantry. Now, so you basically had light, medium, and power armor infantry, and you get extra infantry. So light infantry would have 5 guys, medium infantry would have 4, and then power armor would have 3. There were extra infantry later on, but at this point, that was your option. Eventually, they released artillery infantry, and my dad went absolutely mad. Pretty much everything but mech shot artillery. I think he may have been a World War I artillery operator in a past life, if one believes in that. So they set up the board, and so Dad's got his mechs on the left, he's got his artillery all the way up in the right-hand corner, and then he's got his infantry sort of plain shield to his artillery. Larry sets his mechs up on the same flank as my dad's mechs. He sets tanks in the middle, and he sets the infantry on his right, on his left flank, so my dad's right. So in line with the other infantry. And the game begins. They move forward. Larry is very slapshot at this point. And my dad places his artillery tokens down, and he goes, Paul, why do you keep using artillery? They're crap. Stop using artillery. Get a better unit. Once again, Larry's being a dick. But Larry was a dick. That being said, I'm not sure if the advice was unwarranted. So, the tokens are placed on Larry's mechs. Roughly. They're in the vicinity. So, the next round comes around, and the artillery strikes hit, and my dad rolls his dice, and he hits every mech. All 3 artilleries hits a mech each. Ouch. So, the medium mechs are now at 2/3 health, and the heavy mech is, I'd probably say, maybe at like 2/5. Like, they took 2/5 worth of damage, roughly. And Larry's like, oh, geez. He's like, lucky roll, Paul. He's like, that's your luck for the year, is what he said. And so my dad's like, whatever. And he moves his mechs a bit closer, and he moves the infantry forward. And so everything's sort of coming to a head in the middle of the table. So Larry sends his tanks in the direction to shoot my dad's artillery. Now, artillery has a minimum range. So it has a maximum range. It has a huge maximum range. Like, the sort of general range in MechWarrior the Dark Age was 12 to 18 inches for most weapons. Artillery could get up to 72 inches. But to counteract this ridiculous range, they had a minimum range. So their minimum range on Thumpers, I think, is either 12 or 18. So once these tanks get inside the Thumpers' range, they have to use their machine guns to fight, and they're not very good at tanks, obviously. So Larry moves all these guys forward. He's like, fine, it's all good. I can still take you guys. My heavy mech can easily take both your medium mechs on. It's fine. So Dad puts the artillery tokens down again, right near Larry's mechs. And this time Larry decides to push all his mechs to get them further out of the way. So you can... Each unit gets 2 activations a turn, generally a move and a shoot action. Mechs are special, though. They can take an additional activation at the cost of heat. So when they move an extra distance, they can then take a click of heat. And they can actually just keep doing this until the heat runs out. Most people don't like doing that because you may need your mechs to actually fight other mechs at some point. So you don't really want to push them too hard. But Larry was being careful. He decided to push his mechs out of the range. Except it didn't work. So, the first turn my dad rolled what would be considered poorly. But because of the way it worked, we still hit the mechs. So he rolled like a 1 or a 2 or whatever. And then he rolled low distance. But that's what he wanted. This time he had to roll the correct direction, which I believe he needed a 4 or 5 on his dice, and then he needed to roll the equivalent of a 5 or a 6 to hit the mechs. And he did that 3 times in a row again. Bang, bang, bang! Now Larry's medium mechs are on death's door. If they get hit by another artillery strike, they're screwed. His heavy mech can probably weather 1 more strike, but once you include mech damage into that, it may be bad news. So Larry's like, okay, the left flank is not going well. The mech flank is not going great. So he focuses on taking out my dad's infantry and the artillery. So he moves his tanks up, he attacks the artillery, and he misses. He just misses them. The tanks do nothing. Now, my dad doesn't attack with the artillery with their machine guns, he launches more artillery strikes. That was the plan anyway. And then, then the infantry are attacking. So the power armor are attacking the light infantry, and they should kill them very quickly. But Larry just can't hit anything. It's almost like Larry got cursed, and my dad got blessed before the match. It was like Larry had driven past a witch's house, and she'd just goddamn evil-eyed that son of a bitch on the way through. On the other hand, my dad must have stopped by the local convent and got blessed by the nuns there, because he just couldn't. He was hot. I'm not sure if he actually missed an attack that game. Like, Larry hit maybe like 3 attacks over the course of the game. So his heavy infantry pretty much do nothing to my dad's infantry, and then in return, my dad's light infantry half kills a squad of Larry's heavy infantry. So my dad moves his mechs in and attacks with them. And so he destroys one mech, he destroys a medium mech, and he damages the other medium mech. So Larry fights back and misses everything. That being said, his mechs were very heavily wounded at this point, so the chance of them actually hitting was slim. So this made sense that he missed on a lot of that. Larry still had hope though. Larry was still like, it's alright, I've got my heavy infantry, which are still decent against mechs, and I've got my 2 tanks, and really the artillery can't do much. And so Dad places an artillery token down on the heavy mech, he places one on the medium mech, and he places one on a squad of undamaged power armors. So the next turn comes around, the artillery strikes hit, and this time, the medium mech gets destroyed. The heavy mech took half damage because the token had come off enough of the plate that it wasn't considered a full hit. But that was still like 2-3 points of damage, which was enough to pretty much kill Larry's heavy mech. So that wasn't a big problem. And then, once again, the artillery hits and it goes slightly off course, but instead of hitting one infantry directly, it hits 2 of them and kills them. So Larry now has 1 squad of half-dead guys. He has 1 squad that only has 1 power armor left, and he's got an uninjured squad, and that's fine, but they can't hit anything. Larry's tanks, once again, open fire onto my dad's artillery and does very minimal damage. My dad shoots artillery strikes out, but this time he's hitting the infantry. He's going for the infantry. Larry's mech attacks does nothing. My dad's Centurion, which was one of his medium mechs, takes out Larry's heavy mech. Boom, bang, done. Finished. Larry is screwed at the moment. And he moves his other medium mech over to where the tanks are, and he takes a pot shot, and he heavily damages one of them. Larry, now realizing he's going to lose. He is going to lose this game. That's how it's going to roll. So, Larry, he realizes he's going to lose this game. He takes a deep breath in, he barrels up and he goes, no! No, 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 no. And so people had already gotten used to Larry's antics at this point, so it was really only the immediate vicinity that looked at him here. He's like, no, 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 like this. No, this isn't happening. He's like, you must have cheated somehow. He's like, and so he picks up my dad's dice, he starts rolling them frantically. And he rolls like crap. That was the funniest thing. He didn't roll a single good roll. And he's like, ah! He's just gone completely nuts. He's stormed around. No, this isn't happening. This is not happening. And then my dad says probably the worst thing you can say to a raging person ever. He goes, calm down, Larry. It's just a game, mate. So I lose all the time. It's fine. And Larry, Larry's like, and he's like, no, Paul, you don't lose to you. He's like, what is this? The first game you've won all year? He's like, this is bullshit. And then one of the guy that Dad had been playing previously, we'll call Chad, because his name's pretty close to that. Chad was like the most vanilla wargamer. No, actually, in fact, he's unflavored ice cream of a wargamer. He never stood out. He's just middle of the pack. He doesn't really do anything. But he turns to Larry and he's like, "Hey, Larry, isn't this has got to be one of the worst defeats you ever had? Have you destroyed a single one of Paul's units?" And Larry's like, "Oh." Like, it's like someone finally pointed out and he realized just how bad he had gotten tabled. And it was true. It was not going to end well for him. He hadn't killed a single light infantry. In fact, he'd only mildly damaged one of them. He realizes it's done at this point. He is finished. And my dad's like, "Larry, let's just finish the game, mate." And Larry's like, "Ooh, I don't wanna. You just win. You happy? You. And so he's like, "I'm gonna go have a freaking smoke." And so he struts off, leaves his shit off on the table, which was, once you finish the game, you were meant to pack up so that other people could use the table. That was one of the rules. And so he storms outside and he's like, and Greg goes, "I'm really sorry, everyone," because that was his form, right? When Larry chucked a nana, that was his form. So I'm real sorry, Paul. I really can't say much else. He's like, I'm sorry, Chad, that you had to be there for that. And he just would go around and he'd apologize, sorry about Larry's behavior. He's having a rough time at work. I don't know why, because he was the manager of a local fast food place. I just don't feel like... I mean, I'm not saying that job can't be stressful. It can be. But I just feel like it's not stressful enough to start screaming at strangers in the street over. And so anyway, Greg went around and apologized. If you're wondering, no, I don't know why Greg hung out with Larry. Supposedly, they worked at the same place, so the same fast food place. And Larry had gotten promoted. Larry was the store manager. So he wasn't a shift manager, just for the record. Larry was the store manager there, while Greg was a shift manager. So really, I've seen what store managers do as their job. I don't think it's that stressful, to be honest. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But Larry, Greg just would always apologize for him. I don't know why he hung around with him, because they're like complete opposites. Greg was really chill, really sportsmanlike. He shook hands. He was always like, "Great game. I really like the way you did it. I really like the way you did this particular strategy. That was fantastic." Larry, on the other hand, was a big, sulky toddler. So, yeah. And I know what you're thinking. Didn't you mention last time that Walker told him if he ever had an outburst like that again, he'd be kicked out of the club? Yes, that is true. So, why didn't Walker kick him out? Well, Walker, sadly, was taking a hands-off approach at this point, which... I won't go into it, but he had personal reasons to do so. They were legitimate. And a few months later, he left the club. And then the club had a schism where it split into two different wargaming clubs. So, yeah, Walker wasn't around to really tell this guy off. The guy who was running it in Walker's place was sort of a bit of a light touch, which is exactly why the Wargaming Club eventually schismed once he took over, because the two people who made the next set of Wargaming Clubs, they both felt he was a weak leader and didn't do his job properly. But yeah, so that's it for Larry's Revenge. There is one more story in the Larry pantheon that I have to tell, but that's it for now. Now, the next war story is not going to be on Larry, though. It's not going to be a great victory for me either. I'm finally going to tell a war story where things really didn't go in my favor. It's about draft picking tournaments. So several miniature war games, you would get booster packs and then you'd open them and make an army out of it. And we're going to talk about 3 tournaments that I entered where I got my shit kicked in, basically. So, keep an eye out for that. That's going to be coming out. And then we've also got Gaslands and some other videos coming. So, keep your eyes peeled. I will catch you guys on the next Warstory, or the next stream, or the next video. You have a good one. See yous. Hey everyone, Outro Vamps here. I'm just here to say that I have my Discord up and running, and if you'd like to join it, that'd be awesome. I put stuff on there that no one else gets to see. That includes just like sneak peeks of certain videos and other things like that, artwork, and that kind of crap. As well as I put my miniatures up there that I paint fairly regularly. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, drop into the Discord, have a chat. The link is in the description. You guys have a good one.